Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I mentioned earlier that I was traveling, so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this tonight, but I managed to get here at a reasonable time. And we are going to take a look at a rather interesting run of the GFS late this afternoon that got everybody up in arms because it took a Category 4 hurricane right up the coast and shot it right over New York City and up the Hudson River. And it was actually quite jaw-dropping for a number of reasons, not the least of which was the fact that it created an upper air setup that we've been talking about for on and off over the summer. If you can remember, on a few instances, we mentioned the fact that all this troughing in the east was a little bit dangerous, because if you have a trough and it times out at the same time that you have a tropical storm or a hurricane in the right position, everything times out a certain way, it would bring it right up the coast. Well, the problem is, and I will illustrate that in just a few minutes, the problem with that is that the GFS model, with respect to what it's been showing with regards to the upper air, has been, to say it's been inconsistent isn't even a strong enough word. When we look back at the prior 5 or 6 runs, the differences in what the models are doing in terms of the upper air, night and day. I mean, just it's as if you're in two different worlds. It was, in fact, very difficult for me to kind of figure out how it even got to the point that it did. Finally, it seemed to make a little bit of sense in terms of how it gets there. One of the things that's a little disturbing from the standpoint of perhaps increasing the idea of a threat for somebody along the East Coast is the fact that the GFS is much faster in bringing this closer to the East Coast by a day or even a day and a half. And that's important because if it has the speed correctly, the timing is going to be different than what it was showing in the prior runs. It will impact, how the trough evolves, and ultimately what happens along the East Coast. But there are, at this point, with respect to what it did, there's too much evidence from other models, including the GFS ensembles, which I'm going to show you tonight, that argue against that. We also have some of the new GFS run that I will, when we are done with the weather part of this, we'll have enough of the new GFS run, so that I'll be able to at least tell you what that shows. So why don't we just get that part of the equation going and stand by, and then when it's over, we'll come back and we'll talk for a little bit. Actually, we can't because the video isn't ready yet, but it will be ready shortly. Why don't we just take a look? In the meantime, I will we'll pull up with let's see if I can get the hurricane. Nope, having trouble. There we go. So at least we'll look at the wide satellite view. We have Irma right here. You can see, by the way, how the eye really came back sharply this afternoon, and then it kind of filled again tonight. So it seems to be going through these eye replacement cycles that are almost impossible to forecast. And that's going to mean for some fluctuations in intensity. I think it's moving straight west now, and it might even be moving a little bit south of due west, and soon that southwest motion is going to begin. So that's going to be the critical test number one, is that southwest motion and how much latitude is it going to lose, which is important because the further south it gets, the bigger the threat will be to the Leeward Islands. Okay, so we're going to be watching for that. On the edge of the screen, we can see the next tropical wave, and notice how much further south it is It's closer to 10 degrees north, where Irma is closer to 20 degrees north. So it's going, this wave is going over water that Irma has not touched. And there's enough distance between them at the moment so that this system might have some room for development. The Hurricane Center has indicated that there is a 60% chance of this developing into a tropical depression or a tropical storm, which, by the way, the European picks up on. The GFS didn't really pick up on it too well on the last two runs. We'll see what it does on tonight's run. In the meantime, by the way, we have some disturbed weather in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Southwest Gulf. This is part of the remaining circulation and outflow from Harvey. Some moisture is down there in the Southwest Gulf. The models really didn't do too much with that over the last day or so. It was trying to develop something in the Southwest Gulf back a few days ago, but it sort of backed away from that. We'll see how this disturbed weather holds up. It's not organized at all, and if something were to develop in the Southwest Gulf, we are pretty confident that it would be very slow to occur. Here's that second wave, by the way. When we take a look at that, you can see Irma right here, and here's that second wave that has moved off the African coast. That's down around 10 degrees north. There's distance between them, and there's 600 miles from Irma being up near closer to 20 degrees north. This one being closer to 10 degrees north. Okay, so let me see if the video is now ready to go. So we'll let that play out, and we'll be back at the end. So stand by. And has created quite the stir in the weather community, among others. And I want to go over it because the reason why is being that I'm kind of New York City centered to some degree. It was amazing to see the GFS do this. This is Saturday morning, 2 a.m. And one of the things that one of the takeaways with respect to this run, the one I think is really the more important one, is this, and that is that Irma is being moved a whole lot faster because it's already approaching the coast Friday night. And what this particular run of the GFS model did is take a Category 5 hurricane east of the Carolinas, and then sitting southeast of Atlantic City is a strong Category 4 hurricane Sunday morning, and right over White Plains up the Hudson River. I mean, this was just one of those runs that was, at first glance was jaw-dropping. But I'm going to explain to you why we can't really use this as a valuable forecast tool because there are so many reasons, not the least of which is the fact that this is Sunday afternoon, September 10th, 8+ days from now at 2 p.m. Okay, so we already know what the fact that we're far out into the long range here, that we have all these variables to contend with. But just at this point, I just want to point out that in the last few days for this time frame, or reasonably nearby, we had a landfall in Nova Scotia. We had 2 landfalls in Maine. We had a landfall near Rhode Island, eastern Long Island. We had one in Chesapeake Bay. And we had a whole bunch of them that just basically took Irma out to sea. So what makes this particular one more valid than any of the other ones? And you can ask yourself, okay, well, Joe, how come, or you can ask me, Joe, how come all this variation with these tracks? Well, one of the things that was really bothersome to me is when you look at We're going to look at the upper air for this time frame. And, you know, even though there's always variations of some kind in terms of what is going on model-wise, there's always some sense of at least a little bit of consistency, something that you can follow along that sort of makes sense. This is the upper air for this particular setup. And you have this deep trough, and we've been talking about this deep trough in the east that's dropping down in and around. And it's always a matter of timing. Here's Irma, and in this particular instance, it times out with this deep trough, and it would move right up the east coast as the trough swings around. Okay, well, we'll move this up. You can see how it happens. The trough picks up Irma and then pulls it in north-northwestward right up into New York City and up the Hudson River into upstate New York. And by the way, you know, over the summertime, when we talked about the fact about these troughs in the east, the kinds of setups that you would need to bring a storm up the east coast, this is what I was talking about, where you have a deep trough running down north-south and a southerly flow along the east coast. Well, here's the problem. I'm going to go back a few runs, and I want you to look at, remember this look, okay? Let's go back one run. Look at the difference just in one, I'm sorry, I went back. Yeah, I did go back one run. Look at that difference. It's like you're looking, oh, sorry. So let me just start that again. Okay, so here's your deep trough. And this is for Sunday morning now, okay? So let's go back to the run before this, which was the run that came out Friday morning, midday. Look at the difference in the troughs. It's night and day here. You have this, okay, versus this is the trough that we had for on the late afternoon run for the same time frame. It's totally different. Instead of having a southerly flow along the east coast, you have a westerly flow and a trough that's lifting out into Canada, and that's it. You know, a little troughiness that's left behind back in the middle Mississippi Valley, but it's nothing like what this one was. That's night and day. Okay, well, let's go back two runs. Those the two prior runs look more similar than what came out late this afternoon. Let's go back one more. I'm sorry. Here we go. Now look at it. Now you have an upper low that completely cuts off, a trough that basically gets stretched out and cuts off into the Ohio Valley, and that would bring Irma up the coast with a setup like this, and it did right into Chesapeake Bay. Okay, now let's go. Let me go back again. Let's go back to that upper air. And we'll go back another run. We'll go back to Thursday late afternoon. Back to that full latitude look that we have that we had late this afternoon. So these two runs, the late afternoon from Thursday and the late afternoon from Friday, match up, but none of the other ones do. And well, let's go back again. Let's go back one more. Look at this. Ridiculous. The upper airs are they're not just inconsistent. They're in two completely different planets here. Okay, they really are. They are just in two completely different worlds, and do we have even any clue? There's no sense of consistency in these jet stream patterns that are being indicated by each run. There's almost no consistency from run to run, so that we can follow things along. The jets are totally different. Here's the wider view, and we'll go back just a little bit. This is from late. Now we're back to the run from late this afternoon. Okay, you can see that deep trough here at 96 hours, which is at day 4, and I'll go back to the run before that. It's not that different here. This was the outcome from the 12Z run. The trough what's happening here is, in this particular instance, the trough is so much faster. It's the timing is wrong, so that trough lifts out, and it winds up responding to something else that gets left behind in the middle Mississippi Valley and gets pulled up northward. Okay, so that's one issue. The timing here. Here's the one from late this afternoon. Actually, the trough from late this afternoon is shaped the same way. It's structured the same way, but it's deeper than the prior run. And you'll notice that in this one, because Irma is faster, it times out with the trough differently, and the outcome is different. So this is what we're dealing with here with respect to Irma. Is the GFS correct with the speed here, where it times out with this trough? We don't know. What, and another, I'll show you too. Let me go back to that eastern view, and we'll put the surface on. You can see it here. Okay, so here it is at New York City. Now I'm going to pull up the GFS ensembles. Okay, now what the ensembles are is that the run that you see publicly, okay, is what's called the operational run. That's what everybody gets to see. And then there's the ensemble runs. The ensemble run is what the ensemble is that there's the operational GFS, and then there are a whole bunch of what we'll call the members of that ensemble. Different variations of the GFS. Each one has slightly different parameters. You wind up with slightly different outcomes. Now, when we look at what the ensembles did, if you look closely, these little red numbers these are plots of the each one of the ensemble members of where they have the surface low. What's drawn with the isobars is the mean position. Okay, so the ensemble has the mean position along the Florida coast, with a number of members to the east, off the Florida coast, and off the southeast coast. It has nothing up the east coast. This is for actually, this is for Sunday afternoon, so I'll just back it up one, and we'll go to Sunday morning so we can match it up. This is where the ensemble would mean suggest that the hurricane would be just east of the Florida coast Sunday morning, and the operational run. Whoops, did I do something wrong here? Yes, I did. That's the current run. I'm sorry. So let me just back. Let's start this again. All right, so I'll have to do it in reverse. All right, so here's our hurricane. Okay, there's the hurricane sitting over New York City, and here's the we're going to go to the ensemble, and the ensemble position is down here, right near the Florida coast. So the fact that all the members are concentrated here is telling me that the operational run is just not something that, at this point anyway, is even remotely reliable. We're going, the European and the European ensembles match very closely with the GFS. And one thing that we did notice today too is that the GFS ensemble runs trended more to the southwest, more toward the European than what versus what the GFS was actually saying. This was late this afternoon ensemble run on the GFS. Concentration of positions off the Florida coast and another concentration just off the Florida coast. So some further out, but the bottom line is most of them were all pinned somewhere along the southeast coast in the area in yellow, the yellow and brown that you see, not showing something shooting up the coast the way the model had it. So again, taking my conclusion on all of this is that the GFS operational, what it did this afternoon, was just not something that was useful as a forecast tool. Let me just real quick, I want to just see how much of the new run we have. Let me go to the GFS. We'll go to the 0Z. We only have out to 114 hours. There are your remnants from Harvey that move on through, taking a little longer to get in my area, so we'll probably have a decent day on Saturday with rain into Sunday afternoon before it improves. Monday looks very warm, and then we have the cold front that's coming in for Wednesday. That's probably going to stall out someplace along the East Coast, and that might set up the alleyway eventually for Irma. Why don't we widen out so we can see what the new GFS run has done from what we can see with Irma at this point. I'll back it up, and this is just about right now where it's sitting in the Atlantic. It has that southwest motion, west-southwest, then west, and then west-northwest, taking it just north of the Leeward Islands. And notice, by the way, that the position on this run now is actually a little more to the south, more like the European was today, which will show you the European's view. It's much closer to the European's view now, and the European straddled it north of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic into the Bahamas, and then sitting right off the Florida coast. I mean, the European is implying, a track and a potential landfall somewhere from North Florida up to North Carolina, somewhere in here. I don't know how reliable that is, but the European has been consistent, much more consistent than the GFS. Now, here's the upper air from the European this afternoon. Here is the upper air from the GFS this afternoon I'm sorry, that's the new one. I have to go backwards because when the new run is coming out, it makes it a little difficult to match up straight up. So here's the hour from late this afternoon for Sunday morning, okay, 8 a.m. And here's the European for the same time frame. Look at the difference. I mean, they're night and day. And by the way, this is the one behind it, which the European develops into a small hurricane. That would be Jose, assuming that is correct. But, we don't know that yet. There is a disturbance that's coming off the African coast that is being monitored by the Hurricane Center. All right, so here is Irma right now on the satellite loop, moving westward. The eye has disappeared. It's kind of looking ragged tonight. So, we had the eye disappear last night. It came back this morning into this afternoon. They brought it back up to 120 miles an hour. But it's gotten a little ragged again. Looks like the motion now is either west or even slightly south of west. So that southward motion may have begun. And this is important now. This is going to be very important to see how far south it gets in the latitude. Does it get down to about 18? Does it get down just to 18? Does it get down to 17 north? That's going to make a huge difference with respect to the Leeward Islands. And the other thing is, remember that when we look at the water temperatures, once it gets, here's 45 west. Once it gets west of 45, or for sure once it gets west of 50, the water temperatures spike up. So it will be back into waters that could support a major hurricane. It's on the edge of that right now. It's in this area of slightly cooler water, which is playing a role in weakening it just a little bit. The hurricane track model guidance overnight did come in a little bit further to the south. The members are all still running north of the islands, but it kind of shifted just a little bit south. And in terms of the intensity guidance that we have, almost except for one, they all have this at least as a Category 3, and just a little bit less than half of the models have it as a Category 4. And most of the ones that take it to a Category 4 do so within 36 hours. That might be a little fast, but Irma's been pretty impressive in trying to maintain major hurricane status in spite of the fact that it has been over that colder water for a while. So just this whole thing is really turning out to be a rather interesting exercise in forecasting, and quite the challenge. So certainly has not been an easy thing for us to follow. Now, we're going to leave you with the water vapor imagery, and one of the things that we're picking up on is the fact that the upper low to the north and west seems to be moving northward at the moment. So that certainly would take away any kind of shear issues through all of this. And the upper low is also creating you can see it here. There's a bit of a, let me just get this out. There's a bit of a northerly flow, coming out, and that's part of the reason why we're going to see that. That's a big reason, perhaps, why we're going to see that southwest motion. And by the way, on the edge of the screen right here, you can see the new wave that's coming out, and it is much further south than where Irma is. So it's going to be going over water that Irma has not really touched, and that might give it some juice to strengthen. So we're going to switch it over at this point, and we will chat for a little bit, so just stand by. Okay, I'm here, folks. All right. Karina, whatever your question was, type it out. Let me take a stab at it. The new GFS, I typed it in on the chat, takes it into Chesapeake Bay. Now, let's go back. This is what we've seen from the last 5 or 6 runs. So we've gone from a landfall at Nova Scotia. From Nova Scotia, we had 2 landfalls near Portland, Maine. Then we go to eastern Long Island / Rhode Island. Then the next one from late this afternoon, New York City. Now we're at Chesapeake Bay. This is something that the GFS likes to do. It likes to start out to the east and then gradually back its way west and southwestward. It's done this a number of times in other storms, and we're seeing it here. So this is why I'm thinking at this moment, the highest risk area is going to be the southeast someplace, maybe from, let's say, from North Florida to about Cape Hatteras, somewhere in there will be the greatest risk. I'm in Connecticut, by the way. That's where I traveled. You sent me the question, Karina. Okay, I will. I assume you sent it to my email, so I'll take a look at that. What is the category of the hurricane possibly hitting Long Island? Well, we don't even know that it's going to hit. That from that track, it was a Category 3 on the GFS, strong Category 3 when it moved it up into New York City. That picture was almost like the 38 hurricane, except worse because the center would be going in at New York City, and all of Long Island would be in the eastern semicircle, which would be not good at all, particularly because I live there. I think again the GFS is coming in with each run is going west, west, west. So we've gone from essentially from Nova Scotia, from the far eastern point. Actually, we want to push it out. We had the offshore tracks to Nova Scotia, to Portland, to Rhode Island, to New York City, to Chesapeake Bay. And I think the next step will be the model will come in even further south and west with the runs going forward, unless there's something different in the upper air that the model isn't picking up yet. The Canadian, by the way, takes it to right through the Bahamas, and it's sitting off the Florida coast, and then it seems to flatten the trough out somewhat, and it shoots it northeast and keeps it offshore for as far out as the Canadian model goes, which is at the 240 hours. That seems to be a bit much. It's hard for me to fathom that, only because of the fact that the speed. I'm concerned about the GFS's speeding it up because I think that is going to favor it timing out with whatever troughing is going to be swinging around in the eastern part of the United States. So that, I think, is probably the most important takeaway from today's model runs, is the pickup in the speed. Ryan, consistent with the northeast mid-Atlantic hit. So yeah, but again, remember the trend has been southwest is south and west with each run. So Chesapeake Bay is now the line from New York City. I would bet that if not the next run, the run after that will have it even further south and west. Let me just take a look to see if it might be a little early for the ensembles. And it is, so we can't speculate on that. Now, let's see, with Jose, just out of curiosity. It spins Jose up to a minimal hurricane, takes it to the Bahamas, and then just shoots it out to the, starts to shoot it out to the northeast. That's in the category of who knows, okay? Because we certainly don't know at the moment whether that's I don't even want to worry about it. I don't even want to think about it right now. All of this is on our plate with this first one. Thank you, Julie. I just don't believe the hyping thing is just, I'm not doing that. I never do that. I have a very methodical approach to weather, and that ding noise is my computer. Every time you guys type something, it seems to make some sort of a little ding, but it's not doing it now, so I'm not sure what. Or it might be Facebook. Let me turn that off. Okay. Matthew is correct. Most hurricanes at this position usually recurve out to the northeast and don't hit the U.S. This would be unusual because with Irma being up at about almost to 20 degrees north, as far east as it is, that it winds up being a landfalling hurricane. I think somebody I know went back and checked and could only find one instance of a hurricane starting out this far, getting up almost to 20 north and being out west of 50, or west of 40 for that matter, that wound up hitting the United States. And they went back pretty far in the record books. So this could be a first, this could be in some respects historical if it does happen. But that's a big if. We still have to get there first. Yeah, luck is, you're asking me to predict death toll. I'm not doing that. Let's focus on the hurricane first to see where this goes. What if the Euro trends north tonight? Well, Thomas Giovinello, you know what? That's not impossible. I mean, the European's going to do what the European's going to do. I would just think that the European, maybe it trends north, but it still should be reasonably consistent with its prior run. I'm not thinking it's going to be too out of whack with what it's been doing. Irma is about 20 miles north of where Gloria formed back in '85. I will, trust you on that. We'll get a chance. Maybe I'll go back and look. Eyes move, the track moves, Joe. Okay, I'm not quite understanding that, Karina. Clarify if you would. And I think there is a possibility that Irma could get to a Category 5. I don't see why it couldn't. The conditions are ripe and favorable along the southeast coast. The water temperatures are up in the middle and upper 80s. There's very little shear. There's nothing that should get in the way. And it will get into a spot where we've often seen storms strengthen to majors or even, to Category 4s and to Category 5s. And by the way, Gloria was a Category 5 briefly in its life cycle. And it was a Category 3 when it passed the New Jersey coast, but it wasn't moving very fast. And by the time it hit Long Island, it had weakened down to a Category 1. The storm reminds me of Gloria. Yeah, well, in terms of the track, it's not that dissimilar. Hold on, you guys are really punching the comments tonight. You know what? Luxy Luman. I wouldn't want to go through a Cat 4. I certainly wouldn't. I don't know how people stay in their homes going through a Cat 4. Jason, I turned Facebook off, so I shouldn't be hearing that noise anymore. Let's see. Kathy, update just made, said we'll hit New York with winds. I don't know who said that. Okay. Let's see. Anthony, Joe, Karina is asking if the eye of the hurricane reforms, can the track change? No, I mean the eye is going through what's called an eye wall replacement cycle. What happens is, think of a life cycle of a thunderstorm. Thunderstorms are born, they grow, they peak in intensity, and then they gradually die off. Well, the same thing happens inside the eye wall to a degree. The eye develops, it reaches a peak intensity, and then those thunderstorms have already, they use up whatever energy is around, so they just die off, but a new eye starts to form. And sometimes you'll actually see it on the satellite. You'll see in very intense hurricanes that are undergoing these eye wall replacement cycles, you'll see an eye inside an eye. The old eye wall will expand and decay, and then the new eye wall takes over. It's quite interesting to watch, to see it evolve on the loop. Yeah, a Cat 4 would, just take a house, and, most houses, which aren't, at least up this way, the older homes could withstand it. Some of the newer homes, I wonder. Thank you, Tobias. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Cyan. Really appreciate the hit on the super chat. If any of you feel like buying me a cigar, you can hit the super chat if you'd like. You don't have to, but I'm just putting it out there. Could this eventually become another? Oh, someone asked before. I'm sorry, I did see it. I did see it before about does the eclipse have anything to do with this? Absolutely not. Okay, it's funny you brought that question was brought up, because I was actually talking with one of my colleagues, Joe Rayo, who's very big on astronomy and actually is a part of the staff of the Hayden Planetarium, and was out on an Alaskan Airlines jet over the Pacific Ocean with a group of people watching the eclipse from the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And he brought this subject up, that he was waiting he finally got someone someone did ask him that. Yeah, the answer is no, it has no impact whatsoever. Let's see, there's my buddy Anthony. Okay, Nico, what's the new GFS in Euro model? Nico, we just went through the new GFS. It's got, it's trending south and west, where it has a landfall. We've gone from Nova Scotia to Port, and subsequent runs from back. It started out as an offshore, then it was Nova Scotia, then it was Portland, Maine, then it was Rhode Island, then New York City. Now it's Chesapeake Bay, and I'm thinking that it's going to be, the greatest risk area from this right now with what's going on, I would say, is probably the southeast coast of the U.S. Somewhere from, say, Wilmington or Hatteras, south and west, to maybe northern Florida. Let's say Jacksonville, just to pick up a point, or maybe slightly further south than that. Let's see. The Duke, these things are unpredictable. They certainly are difficult. That I will give you. Brian Ford, once Harvey moves out, will there be more model consistency with Irma? I don't think that Harvey's, whatever circulation and upper air vorticity that's around is affecting that. Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very generous. Thank you. I don't think that it's really having much of an impact, in terms of the overall broad atmosphere. Jared K., what brand of liquor do you recommend drinking as I sit on my back porch and watch trees get uprooted? Well, you know what? How about a gentleman's Jack Daniels with a cigar? Does that work for you? Because it works for me. Cullen, 47 in northwest New Jersey. I know it's really cool out tonight with the clear skies and the light winds. I'm up here in interior Connecticut, and it is nice and cool. Ian Duncan, you're on. Let's see. Boy, you guys are really participating in the chat tonight. I'm loving it. They're coming up fast. If I missed you, I'm really sorry. Darren Constantine, I don't know. It's hard for me to lay a percentage, on this, especially because it's this far out. Why don't we just wait? Let me wait a couple of more days. Let's see some more model runs before, we start getting, worked up over this. Hugo was a Category 4 Rockwood, if I remember correctly. Let's see. Jay Sweetie, today has been gorgeous. I know, it was really nice today. Didn't get out of the 60s here. I just loved it. Thundering and Lightning, Mir Schultz in Miami. Yeah, you guys still have a ways to go before the first cold front makes it down your way. What would happen if the hurricane hits the coast as a Cat 5? Sean Curry. You don't want it would not be pretty. They've had Cat 4s hit North Carolina going back. So a Cat 5 would be very damaging, considering how much more built up a lot of these areas are than they were. There are areas that haven't seen a Cat 4. They've seen Cat 3s, but have never seen Cat 4s, or maybe have rarely seen a Cat 4. Hugo did a number on Charleston when it went through as a Cat 4. A lot of those areas have been built up so much more since their last hit. Can a Cat 5 sustain itself as far north as New York City? No. The thermodynamics and the physics of the atmosphere would argue against it. A Cat 3, yeah, under certain circumstances, but I think that might be the top of the range. Let's see. Big hurricanes hit the East Coast, 38, 45, 54. Oops, let me scroll back. It's coming in fast. Let's see. 54, 55, 60, 75, 85, 35, 69, and 1900. Big hurricane, Cat 4, Cat 5 past time. Well, I think the 38 hurricane was a 3. The Great Atlantic Hurricane, which I believe was in 44, was also a 3. Donna in 60 was, I believe, when it passed New York, it was a 2. Bell in 77 was a 1. Bob skimmed Eastern Long Island and went over Block Island, I believe, is a strong 2, borderline 3. Trying to remember. Gloria was a 1. This is for New York City now. And Hugo, I believe, was a 4. And then there were a number of 3s scattered along the way along the Carolinas over the years, which they're escaping my memory at the moment. Matthew was terrifying. It was supposed to hit directly, only turned just enough to skirt. Correct. Matthew would have been the first Category 3 or higher hurricane to make landfall, but it literally, the eye just kind of skimmed the Florida coast. It never really truly made a full penetration inland. Fire Island is a Cat 5. I really don't think you can get the Cat 5 for Long Island. I don't think can actually physically happen. But a 3 would be, incredibly damaging. Cyan, thank you again. I won't scold you, okay? Thank you. Can you imagine the horror of trying to evacuate? Yes, I can. I've been in the horror of the daily rush hour drive on Long Island, and it's no picnic. Will the water temperature around Glen Thompson keep strength down? Yes. Once it, the only way, there's 2 ways that you can sustain a Cat 3 for Long Island. One is that you bring a hurricane up the coast and it's accelerating to unusual speeds. The 38 hurricane was moving at almost 60 miles an hour. So the motion, it was moving so fast that it really didn't have enough time over the colder water. Once it gets north of 35 north, the water temperatures really drop off. The thing is that if you get a storm that's moving 60 miles an hour, to move from 35 north to 41 north is 6 hours, okay? So that isn't enough time for a storm to weaken. It'll start to weaken maybe a little bit, but the motion going so fast. And that's what happened with the 38 hurricane. It basically was in the process of transitioning over into an extratropical storm when it made landfall. But the bottom line is that it was a Cat 3 hurricane when it came on land. It was just moving so fast that it was moving. It just couldn't weaken. That's the only way it would sustain. The other way it might sustain is if it were accelerating and in some really bizarre upper air setup that it was coming in from the southeast, because the water temperatures as you go offshore are much warmer. You don't have to go that far offshore. If you go a couple of hundred, less than 100, if you go 100 miles offshore, you see sometimes the buoy readings and they're 20 miles out. They can be 3 or 4 degrees higher than some of the water right along the immediate coast. But if it's coming in from the southeast and it's coming in at a pretty good clip, it's over 80 degree plus water. It won't have time to weaken. But most standard tracks of these storms are from the south or south-southwest. So and they're moving at when they get to our latitude, if they're moving at 30, 35 miles an hour, that is slow enough so that the colder waters do begin to have an impact. The left hook is the most interesting element of the GFS model, runs to me, and it seems to be spitting that out. Yeah, well, and it's responding to the trough to the northwest. It's basically getting pulled in by the upper trough, and whatever cutoff low is there. So the left hook is not good. If you bring a landfalling storm up the coast that goes in the way Sandy did into coastal New Jersey from the southeast, that is from the standpoint of storm surge, that is very problematic indeed. Let's see. Okay. How do I feel about blocking high in the North Atlantic? It seems like a miss is increasingly unlikely. Thoughts? By the way, thanks for the ad on Facebook. Oh, Scott, sure. No worries there. But you know what? I don't know how much blocking there is. Let me take a look. It doesn't appear to be any blocking going on. Well, okay, I take that back. I mean, there is a big ridge that builds from the northwest Atlantic, south of Nova Scotia, into eastern Canada and in over Hudson Bay. So there is some blocking there. That ridge is going to be important if it's real, okay, because that's going to trap the troughing down, from the Great Lakes down to the southeast coast. So that's a factor that is going to be very important in how this all evolves. Let's see. What are the similarities between Irma and Sandy? Sandy came out from the Caribbean and then moved northwestward and northward, and actually was out at 70 west before this, the large upper air storm that was sitting in the Tennessee Valley basically just swallowed it up. Sandy was a Cat 2 that gradually transitioned over into this huge extratropical storm, and when the whole center went inland near Seaside Park and Seaside Heights in New Jersey, you had that massive tide in New Jersey. Joe Bastardi said high tide, big bag, full moon tide, Cat 4, Cat 5, past high tide. The full moon, I believe, is coming. It's this Thursday, if I remember correctly, and if we get a storm this weekend, it'll be coming off the full moon, so the tide still could be a little bit on the high side. That may have some impact if we wind up with some kind of landfall. This is not, by the way, I just want to address too the fact that I know some people have been I haven't seen it, but a few people have told me that some people are basically photoshopping hurricane center stuff and making it look like Irma's going into Texas. That's pretty mean to do. After those poor people have going through so much right now, that's really a mean thing to do, whoever's doing that. And, stop it. Okay. It's not funny. It really isn't. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I could get to all these comments. I'm loving the fact that you guys are all getting into the conversation. What do I think about hurricane? Well, it's all we've been talking about, Samantha. Right now, let's see what happens when Irma gets into that warm water and how strong it gets. It should be a strong Cat 3 when it passes north of the Leewards. Might even have a shot to go to a Cat 4. Right now, it's basically outperformed. When you think about it, Irma has and we've talked about the fact that the intensity models and the intensity guidance is, it doesn't always catch things, and it didn't catch this early round of explosive deepening that the storm has, and the fact that that Irma's done that tells me that as long as the upper air conditions remain favorable, when it gets to where that water is a little bit warmer, it may, once it starts another intensification phase, it might do it a lot faster than you think. Let me see if the ensembles are in, Cyan. I don't think they are. Might still be a little bit too early. Yeah, no ensembles yet, so it is a little bit too early. South Jersey Mega Bear, again, the GFS is trending west with every run. So now we have Chesapeake Bay. And, we could look at it, given the trends, that wherever the GFS has it is the, that cone of uncertainty that the Hurricane Center does that widens out over time. The northern edge of that is now where at Chesapeake Bay, which is where tonight's run is. That would be the northern edge of that. Let's call it a cone of uncertainty. Okay. I wish we could skip all this and jump to straight tracking winter storms. Mimi, I have to tell you, I was actually thinking about that this evening, that when that time comes. Okay, Cynthia says for an NHC, a bias correction is applied to the GFS forecast data, lowering pressures artificially. That's good to know. So, the extreme pressures maybe not at 900 are a bit much, but the European did have it in the 920s. So, it's still, we still could wind up with a strong 4 and maybe a Cat 5. Rockwood, the water is warm, so it will. You're going to see this thing strengthen, a bit once it gets a little bit further to the west. Cyan, Irma right now is not that, the core of the hurricane is not that big. That may expand over time as it gets further west. Some people are saying it will hit New York on 9/11. Okay, yeah, I know, Tanya. It's amazing some of the stuff that I've seen, and this is why I don't, you'll never hear it from me. Okay, let me just take a look at something. Just hang on one second, folks. Just bear with me. If 9/11 is Monday, September 11th, and we all know that what 9/11 did to us and means to all of us, strictly coincidental. And I'm sure there are going to be people that are going to make a thing out of that, but that's just one of those things that just winds up happening. Is just a big coincidence. Let's see, just a couple of more minutes, folks. GEFs are trending farther north. Kyle Eliza, not the GEFs I looked at. Now the GFS ensembles trended southwest today, and so did the 18Z. This could roar ashore at the time of the Giants-Cowboys season opener. Yeah, you're right. Is that a Monday night game? I'm not sure. I know I have the first Monday night game where I'm going to be on the Jumbotron. So whenever that first Monday night Giants game, I'm going to be on the Jumbotron. All right, I gotta just let me back up. I just saw Nico. I'm not believing anyone who says it will hit specific right now because it's not starting. You know what? That's a wise thing, Nico. Really. no one at this point can tell you where this is going and where it's going to hit. I think what I just said is really the best that you could probably say about this. And I've seen other forecasters, with the giving their opinions, that that there's a possibility for certain areas to have impact. And I'm, judging from what I'm seeing, this is where my head's at the moment. But I'm not in any position based on the models 8 days out to, picking points and narrowing it down to some small area. Fake videos going around. I know it's horrible that people are doing that. That's just so wrong. Sometimes, there's a special place in hell for, people that do stuff like that. I don't understand, it's just not funny. You look at some of these people that have water in their houses, and they're up to the house, the houses, the water's up to the roofs of their houses, and they've lost everything. And just to do something like that is just awful. No, the Euro doesn't start till 2 a.m. and I can tell you right now, I am not staying up till 2 a.m. to see it. I'll wait till tomorrow morning to do that. All right, folks. You know what? It's coming up on an hour. I've had a wonderful time tonight. I hope you have. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all the new people that have shown up. And I can see you've been throwing up these, all these wonderful comments. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to you this time. I will try my best to get to you the next time. And the next time will be, let's shoot for, how about noon tomorrow? This way we'll have the advisory, we'll have the overnight models, and by the time we get everything underway, most of the new GFS will be out, and we'll go from there. I think that'll work. Thank you for those of you who hit the super chat tonight. I really appreciate it. It's I get to go out and get myself a cigar and a beer tomorrow night and just relax, and that's a good thing. So thank you very much for those of you who did that. And we will see you tomorrow. And please, 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 thank you, Cynthia, and all of you that are on here. Please, 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 have a great, safe holiday weekend. If the weather is nice where you are, take advantage of it. If you're in the New York area on Monday, it's going to be a nice late summer day, which will be great for the beach, great for barbecues, great for whatever you want to do. If you happen to be off, I do not happen to be off, so I will be working. But I am off tomorrow, and I am off Sunday, so that's going to mean for live streams at a more reasonable time. So we'll do one tomorrow, probably around noontime, and then we'll do another one maybe late tomorrow evening, not at midnight. Maybe we'll do it at around 8 or 9 o'clock. I think that might work. And enjoy yourself, folks. Okay, have a great holiday weekend. We'll see you tomorrow.